Well, I cannot say right now that you can depend on the data from some other website. That's just me being honest. So that's why
Yeah.
I'm like, I kind of just stick to, realistically, I stick to Furnish Finder. I don't even stick to Mashvisor, but I know people who do use Mashvisor to do, their analysis. So yeah, I
Got it.
cannot really say, just because again, it's a newer concept. There isn't enough software out there, or apps out there with accurate information.
Hi, everybody. Jose Luis Morales here. Welcome back to another episode of the Morales Group Show. Today, we have a very special guest. The name is Kelly Rhymes out of St. Louis, Missouri. And today, she is going to teach us how to invest in midterm rental properties. She's going to be talking to us about how to finance midterm rentals, how to find midterm rentals, how to find tenants for midterm rentals, how to analyze midterm rentals, basically an all-in-one podcast. Welcome to the show, Kelly. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for inviting me onto your show.
Yeah, I'm excited about this topic. I feel with Airbnb kind of cooling down, the midterm rental topic has been a lot more popular. So I'm excited personally to learn more about them and also to share this valuable information with our viewers. So for our viewers who don't know who Kelly Rhymes is, who is Kelly Rhymes? And then how did you get involved with the midterm rental space? And then how did you get such a cool last name as Rhymes? I'm kidding.
Well, I have been investing in real estate for a while. It's been about 18 or 19 years.
Mhm.
I actually started off house hacking. So I rented out one unit in a two-family building, and I lived
Mhm.
on the other side. So my real estate investment career started off in rentals, particularly long-term rentals. So I've always had a portfolio of long-term rentals here in St. Louis. Then I jumped into luxury short-term rentals, and that was in Scottsdale, Arizona. So I moved to Arizona for a while. So I did luxury short-term rentals there, did well, and then decided to come back to St. Louis right
Mhm.
before the pandemic. And that was the best thing I could do because my family was here. I was there by myself. So I had to pivot and I had to change how I was doing things because St. Louis is not really a luxury market for short-term rentals and vacation rentals. So I had to change what I was doing. And with the pandemic hitting and everything happening, that's how I ended up getting into midterm rentals. So that is a little bit about me. My last name was given to me by birth. I was blessed with a
I
cool
love it.
last name. And no, I'm not related to Busta Rhymes.
That's what I was going to say. What I wanted to ask you for our viewers that maybe don't know what a midterm rental is, like how would you describe a midterm rental and how is that different from a long-term rental or like an Airbnb or a short-term rental?
Okay. Well, a midterm rental is that happy medium, right? So if
Mhm.
you have a long-term rental, usually you're going to rent it typically for a year. Sometimes people rent them for 6 months. Well, with midterm rentals, my average guest stay 3 to 6 months. But what really qualifies a midterm rental is any stay over 30 days, so 30 days plus. So that's a little bit different than the short-term rentals because usually, of course, short-term rentals are 30 days or less, but typically those are the 1 week stays or a few days stays and things like that. You don't have your typical guest that you would have with the short-term rental just because these people are usually traveling for a specific purpose, business related or education purposes or whatever it may be. They're not just coming to have a good time and party. So it's a different type of person who stays in midterm rentals.
Got it. Who typically stays in a midterm rental?
Well, there's a variety. So for myself, I have people who are going through divorce or life changes. So they, like one particular person needed a temporary place to stay to figure out the divorce. I have someone who's relocating to the city to be closer to her grandchildren. I have traveling nurses. I've had insurance claim victims and things like that. We've had construction workers. So I've had a variety of people stay in my properties. But it could be of anyone who just needs a temporary housing for a certain amount of time. It could be the entertainment industry. It could be a lot. It's just that category of I just need a place to stay for a few months.
Got it. Um, why a midterm rental versus just doing it long term? I mean, what are the benefits to the landlord of doing that versus just kind of saying, "Hey, I'm going to rent it long term"?
Well, one benefit is you will make more money. You're able to charge more with the midterm rental. So, of course, that's going to be the biggest benefit of it all. As far as the location, you can have midterm rentals in many different locations, but not all. So, for a long term rental, you can usually just have that anywhere and it's probably going to be rented, right? It doesn't really matter.
Hmm.
People are looking for a permanent place, really, instead of a temporary place. So it's going to be a little bit different in that way as well. But mainly it's going to be you will get paid more money than you would with the long term rental. So for my long term rental, and I can just give you an example. It's a midterm rental that if it was a long term rental, it's only like a little 1 bedroom house, right? It's really small.
Hmm.
It can be considered a tiny house. So it probably could rent for, let's just say, 700 to 750, okay? Just as a long-term rental. But as a midterm rental, I'm able to charge 1,300, and I actually can push that up a little bit more. I just haven't tested the market yet. But currently, I have no problems charging 1,300. It stays booked. I mean, it's back to back, so that's the difference.
Got it. What type of properties are typically better for midterm rentals? I know that you mentioned that this was a 1 bedroom. Do smaller
Mhm.
properties typically perform better in midterm rentals? Do larger properties perform? Or do you want to be a certain proximity to like a hospital? What type of properties typically perform better as a midterm rental?
Well, it's not really about what performs better. It really depends on who is your target market or who is your niche, right? So for the
Hmm.
smaller properties, and that's what I stick to at this point. So my smaller properties are only catering to those traveling professionals. So they may, they're just coming for work, or like I said, those life changes where you just have maybe one or two people staying. But at the same time, larger properties are going to be better for insurance claims or relocation of families and things like that. So they both can work, but you do need to do your market research, see what's happening in your target market, your area, or wherever you want to do your midterm rentals. See what's going on. That will help you determine what size property you want. So, like, you really have to look at the demand too. I often tell people, go out there and look at the demand, see who's coming into town. Do you think you need a larger property or a smaller one? Which one do you think will work according to the information you see in the market?
So when you say look at the demand, that
Mhm.
sounds great, but how do you look into the demand?
Right. Great question. Because since midterm rentals, I mean, technically they've been around. They've been called corporate rentals, right? But there hasn't been any data like we have been tracking or people have been tracking for short term rentals or long term rentals. So you have like Air DNA that usually is pretty good with short term rentals. There really isn't many, there aren't many sites that you can find data on. Now, MashVisor does say that they provide information about midterm rentals, but personally, I stick to just going to the most popular midterm rental website, which is Furnish Finder. And I go out there and look at their data and I look at the competition on their website just because I know most people are going to be listing their properties on that site if they're doing midterm rentals.
Got it. So basically, looking at Furnish Finder, what do you look for? I know that you're obviously saying demand, but if I'm going through furnishfinder.com, like what am
Mhm.
I looking for? I know obviously you're looking at the competition, but what specifically am I looking for as I'm looking for uh, these properties?
Information. Okay, so Furnish Finder actually has stats and they provide the data for you. So they will tell you if you put in your city, they will show you how many people are looking for housing in that area through their website. Now, this is not going to be, everybody, but just specifically through their website. Who's out there searching? How many number of people have looked at these listings? So it gives you data about that. It gives you data about the sizes of the properties, if they allow pets, bedrooms, bathrooms. Like it gives you that type of information. So you can definitely look at that. But I also go into their map and look at actual listings in the area I'm interested in. So if it's a new midterm rental, I'm getting into a new market, I am definitely going to take a look at that neighborhood. I'm not looking at the entire city. I am looking really at that neighborhood to see what's happening there in that neighborhood. Now, if it's something I already have, a property I already have, I still go out there and review the market on a regular basis just because things change. Pricing changes. We have high seasons, we have low seasons. So things have to be adjusted, and I need to keep abreast of what's happening. And there's more and more people coming into this market, into the midterm rental space. So there's more and more competition. So I always have to stay abreast of what's happening. And that's how I typically go out and do it.
Got it. What are some red flags when looking at Furnish Finder that you're like, oh, like if I see this, I'm
Mhm.
staying away from that? And what are some maybe green flags that if you see this, you're like, oh man, this is actually like a really good opportunity?
So, red flags, when I go out there to just kind of poke around at the competition and see what's happening. If I look at a listing and it says contact for availability, that means that person hasn't updated their calendar. I don't know if it's rented or not. Typically, when I look at the calendar within Furnish Finder, I don't see anything. So I kind of like disregard those properties because I can't tell if they are rented or not. So there's not a comp for me, right? The green flags, of course, is when I'm doing those same things and I see multiple properties in the same area being rented. I can see the prices. I can see how long they're being rented for. That lets me know, okay, this is a desirable area. People want it here. This is how much I could charge. Will these numbers fit? Will they work for what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to make as a profit? So those would be some, I guess, red flags and green flags.
I love it. I love it. When you're looking at the numbers on those websites, like what do good numbers typically look like, and what do bad numbers typically look like? Like meaning, like okay, there's 10 properties, they're all rented for the next 30, 60 days. Rents are 25% above the market relative to long-term rentals, or like what is good numbers versus bad numbers, I guess.
Well, I mean, I really can't say there are good versus bad. Realistically, when I'm out there just doing the market research, it's always going to be bad if there are a lot of properties in the area, but not enough being rented. That's like, but so there's not really a number to it. It's just that I'm looking at everything in general. If I see, let's just say, 5 properties in a neighborhood and only one of them is being rented, then I need to see, okay, why? Is there something going on? What size property is this? So maybe that may be a larger property, and then we have the other ones that are smaller properties. Well, that tells me then these smaller properties may not be desirable, or this may not be the right area for me because there isn't enough demand here, right? I really couldn't put a number to it. I'm just looking at it overall to see what the full picture looks like.
Got it. On top of Furnish Finder or MatchVisor, any other websites that I would need to be familiar with as it relates to midterm rentals?
Um, well, I cannot say right now that you can depend on the data from some other websites. That's just me being honest. So that's why
Yeah.
I'm like, I kind of just stick to realistically, I stick to Furnish Finder. I don't even stick to MashVisor, but I know people who do use MashVisor to do, their analysis. So yeah, I
Got it.
cannot really say just because again, it's a newer concept. Uh, there isn't enough software out there or apps out there with accurate information.
I love it. So let's say that I was targeting traveling professionals. How
Mhm.
would I go about marketing my property specifically to traveling professionals? And how would I furnish my property in a way that it attracts traveling professionals as well, too?
Okay. And I'm glad you said traveling professionals because people get hung up on that traveling nurse, and it's not just traveling nurses, it's a lot of people traveling for work, right? So, as far as advertising for those particular people, there's a number of things you need to do. You can't just put a listing out there and think that's just going to work. But if you do put a listing out there, which you will, You have to talk to those people, right? I tell my students, like, talk to the people in your title. So let's just say you have a property near a major corporation. You need to say that in the title, within walking distance to XYZ corporation, right? Or attention, construction workers, major construction near the airport. We are located, something like that. Just talk to whomever you are trying to attract into your property. That's the biggest thing you need to do, right? Some other ways you can attract people is you have to get out there and kind of do some networking. Start talking to other business owners in your community, right? So maybe join a chamber of commerce. Maybe join, some other organizations that can help you connect with other business owners or people who are in HR in these corporations or these agencies that you can network with and try to build those relationships with. Even attending relocation kind of conferences or things associated with the industry. Start attending those events and building those relationships. That's another way you can definitely get people in your property. Word of mouth, networking with just local people in your area, friends, family, whomever. Let them know what you do. They will often have people that they know that need some type of temporary housing at some point or another. Now, as far as the property is concerned, what do I do to the property to, I guess, allow those type of travelers to be comfortable? That was the next question, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, I make it as warm and cozy as possible. I do not overdo the furnishings. I provide basic furniture, nice, updated. It cannot be, something that's just from your garage that you had sitting for a while. Make sure you have decent quality furniture, decent, comfortable beds. As far as like the bedrooms, I always have blackout curtains because a lot of times some people work overnights. So they want to sleep during the day. So having those little things. As far as the kitchen is concerned, making sure you have enough cooking items or utensils and supplies so that people can really cook full meals. Remember, these people are in the property for over a month. So like I said, mine's typically 3 to 6 months. These people are cooking. So having those crock pots, a nice set of pots and pans, a good coffee maker, just those little things that you may not think about when you think about short-term rentals because people aren't really staying that long. You need to think about that with your midterm rentals. What do you use in your kitchen that you use on a regular basis? Those type of things would be what you would put in your midterm rental. But otherwise, just making it very comfortable for people, making sure your location is safe and making sure it's quiet. Those are the number one things. I know people who are looking for midterm rentals often want in-unit laundry, of course. So that would be a big one, a plus. And a lot of them are looking for reserved parking or covered parking. So those could be some things that could allow you to stand out just to make sure your property has those things and set you up for some success.
I love it. I never heard the blackout curtains before, but if you're marketing to travel nurses, that would probably be a good one. If they're working at nighttime, that would actually be a reason that they would potentially choose your property over their property. Now,
Yep.
I know a lot of people, they think travel nurses specifically when they think travel professionals.
Mm-hmm.
How would you say to target travel nurses?
So for travel nurses, same thing. I make sure in my titles I'm talking to those people. So if I'm near a certain hospital, I'm going to say that. Within so many miles or walking distance of this hospital. Making sure I put those things like blackout curtains, those safety features. So some
Mm-hmm.
people, and I don't usually really have a lot of cameras, but one property in particular, I do have a camera on the front door. So I will put something like security camera, front door only. If you have a security system, make sure you put that in your description. Just those little features to let them know that it is secure. You can have the code or you can set your own codes. Give them that peace of mind is always great. Because especially if they are working in a new location by themselves, coming home late at night or early mornings, they want to make sure that everything is going to be okay. So any of those features, if you have some place for them to relax or exercise or anything like that within the property, you can also include those little details, just so that they're like, okay, yeah, this will work for me.
Got it. You talked earlier about agencies and you talked about relocation companies as well too. Can you elaborate a little bit more about relocation companies and agencies? Like, are there specific relocation companies that maybe people should look into, or there certain agencies that people should be familiar with when targeting traveling professionals?
Well, the ones you'll hear about the most, as far as the relocation companies, would be ALE Solutions. That's a big one. And I think it is, what is the name of the other one? It just escaped my mind, but there's another one. I can't think of right now. I have to look it up and get back to
It's
you.
all
But
good.
I think it was. It's not. Well, Travelers Haven is another relocation company, but the thing is, with them, you have to have so many properties before they will allow you to work with them. But that is another relocation company. Now, as far as agencies, now there are a lot of different agencies out there. When I mentioned agencies, it was normally you're going to get a traveling nurse through an agency, or they're coming through an agency. So there are a number out there. All you really have to do is kind of Google, and then you'll come up with some different agencies. But there are a couple out there, and I can probably, if I look on my computer, I have a list I could pull up real quick. Let's see.
I love it.
Yeah, because I have it, and I'm just like, you know how people ask you a question, you're like, it just blew my mind. I can't remember, but I'm about to give
Oh, it
it to you right
happens all the time.
now.
Yeah.
Let me pull it up. Okay. So let's see. We have on the top temporary housing directory. That was the other one. And I actually did a call with them. So yeah, there's another one. Assured relocation is another relocation. Now, as far as healthcare agencies, AYA is a number one. They have a lot of people that work for them as far as traveling nurses. But there are also other ones, like I said, there are plenty of agencies out here. But not only that, you do have student housing, and there are some websites that you can list on for that. And like ULoop is for student housing. That's one website. And so you just really have to poke around out there. There are a lot of different websites that you can list on.
Yeah.
The problem is, will you get a response or get any feedback or any hits from these sites? That's the
I
thing.
love it.
You never know.
And I think it almost comes down to studying your market. Like when you said student housing, it made me think, well, some markets may be better for student housing. When you said construction near the airport, I'm like, oh, well, some areas may be better for construction.
Right.
Hospitals, some areas may be better for hospitals. So I think it really just comes down to knowing your market and then
Exactly.
seeing which one of those would be better for you. So let's talk about the big one. This is the one that a lot of people are talking about right now. They're talking about like insurance companies. I like how
Mhm.
you broke it down that for maybe traveling professionals, maybe smaller properties, but if you're going to be targeting insurance companies, maybe larger properties as well too. How do you target insurance uh, relocation clients?
So you would basically, of course, list on those sites that I gave you, but that is all about relation building. So midterm rentals is not something simple like short-term rentals where you can just put your property out there, somebody's going to book it, and you don't have to do much. You do need to do some footwork, some leg work, get out there and start meeting people and connecting with people. So as far as relocation, you the only way you're going to connect really with those relocation companies, the major ones, is if they reach out to you or you list on their sites.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you would have to figure out a way to get into some of these major companies and figure out how you can build relationships with whomever is responsible for relocation in that company. Now, I'm not going to say that's going to be an easy task because you're dealing with a big corporation, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
But that those are things you do have to do. And like I mentioned before, connecting with other businesses, the Chamber of Commerce, that's how you meet other business owners. You may be able to meet some of these people through those different networking groups. So those would be the best options that I could give you at this time.
I've heard that it's risky having midterm rentals, or that you have to have a higher risk tolerance, meaning that like your property may be empty, that in some cases, instead of like renting it out for a couple days or mid-month, it may not make
Mm-hmm.
sense to do that. And the reason that way, you want to keep the calendar open. So therefore it requires a little bit of a higher risk tolerance. What would you say to that?
Well, that is definitely correct. Normally, for myself, typically as far as vacancies are concerned, I usually don't have more than a week between guests. But there have been times where I've had a month, just waiting on the next guest. I had someone booked, but I just had to wait that amount of time. And just like you said, it all depends on the regulations and how you feel. So, for example, the one particular property where I waited a month, well, that community does not allow anyone to stay less than 90 days. So, not only does the city have that rule, it's also an HOA I'm in. So, I have to make
Mm-hmm.
sure I follow those rules, and therefore I can't put a short term rental person in there. Now, other properties that I have where it's not that strict, I just choose not to put short-term rental guests in there just because I don't want to have to deal with anything happening in between
Mm-hmm.
my regular midterm rental guests coming. So, like, I don't want anybody coming in there and tearing something up before my next midterm rental guest, or something, silly happening. So I just prefer just to wait. I also don't want to lose out on getting another midterm rental guest because I've booked a short-term rental person in, and it's now interfering with someone who would have booked for a longer stay. So that's another reason why myself and a lot of people just choose not to do both and just choose to stick to midterm renting. But the risk, yeah, it's a little bit high, but you got to remember these people are staying for a long period of time. So it's not like you're constantly having to fill a property every so many days or weeks. And it's just going vacant all of the time. That is what, if my person stays like 3 months, so that vacancy may happen once a year, if that, a little bit, it's not that often. I'm pretty much occupied most of the time.
I was going to ask you, how long is a typical stay for some of these midterm rentals?
So for mine is 3 to 6 months. They typically start off with 3 months and then they'll extend.
Got it. And then how do you determine how much to charge in midterm rentals in a way where it compensates for maybe some of those vacancies, or that 30-day where there's no income coming in, so that it
Mhm.
balances out and at the end of the day it's actually more profitable than a long-term rental?
So you will have depending on where you are. Where I am, I have my high
Mm-hmm.
seasons and low seasons, right? That's probably going to be the majority of the United States. It's going to be some point of the year where you have your low seasons. Well, the higher seasons, you're going to charge more money, just like a hotel or a resort or any other hospitality business. When it's high, you're charging more and you're saving those reserves. And I make sure I tell people that you always have to have reserves. You never know what's going to happen. So make sure when you get paid every month, you set aside a certain amount of money to cover repairs or vacancies or whatever that may come up, so that you will not be stressed out and you can relax during those times where you're just waiting on the next guest.
I love it. Do you advertise like on Airbnb, VRBO, or Booking.com as well too, or no?
So I advertise on Airbnb. I don't do VRBO or Booking.com, but I am thinking about doing Booking.com. There are some other sites I put my properties on, such as like Hello Landing, or depending on what the property looks like, I might be able to do corporate housing by owner. So there are other sites. I just choose not to use VRBO just because I just didn't have a great experience with them before in the
Mm-hmm.
past. So I just was like, no, I'm just not gonna worry about that. My property stayed filled based off of the where I have it listed currently.
If you have it listed on different websites, how do you sync the calendars together?
Well, most sites have a way for you to import the calendars from other sites. So you can do it that way, or if you have some type of a CRM system like Hostly or
Mm-hmm.
Guestly, I'm sorry, or one of those type of platforms, a lot of times they will sync those calendars for you. Now, the only thing is Furnish Finder, like you can sync calendars with Furnish Finder and vice versa. But when you're using those platforms like the Guesty or anything like that, they don't typically list on Furnish Finder. So you do have to do that part manually.
Is there such thing as a midterm rental arbitrage? Like meaning like I go to a landlord, I say, hey, I'll rent out your place for $2,000. I bring
Mhm.
in travel nurses, I bring in insurance relocation. And is that common or is it more common for people to own their rental properties?
No, that's very common. I'm gonna tell you, I majority of my properties are rental arbitrage. I do own, but to grow and scale, yeah, rental arbitrage is the way I went, and it works out fine. I went directly to the landlords. I tell them exactly what I'm doing. I get their permission. They agree, and we're fine. And I've built great relationships with those landlords because I've had properties for some of them, but going on 3 years rental arbitrage. So yeah, they just keep renewing. We're doing good. They're getting their rent, no problems, and we just keep it going. I've even had some give me more properties.
What does the pitch look like to a landlord? Like, let's say I want to approach a landlord and do a midterm rental arbitrage. How would that conversation look like with the landlord?
So typically, what I do is I will go to a property, just look at it as if I was looking at the property for myself, right? Because
Hmm.
I want to make sure it's going to be a good fit before I say anything. So I need to go take a look at it. If I want it, then I basically approach either the owner or it may be the property manager. I pretty much say, hey, um, this is what my business is, and I'm talking business to business. My business houses traveling professionals, and I'm looking for a new place to do that. We furnish it, we pay all the bills. We don't, nothing changes. Everything will be in the company's name. But we have guests that typically stay, and I tell them 3 to 6 months. They're working professionals, so they're not tearing the property up. And I pretty much kind of just go through exactly what I do and what happens in the business. And most of the time, they can relate because once you say anything like traveling nurses, most people have or know someone who's a traveling nurse, right? Not to say you
Hmm.
have to use that, but most people can relate and say, oh, yeah, my sister or my cousin was a traveling nurse. They know exactly what that is. And they're like, oh, well, yeah, that's fine. And I get a yes every time.
I love it. Um, so whenever you do buy the properties, um, is the financing any different than buying a traditional rental at all?
No, it's not. Whenever buying a property, I just go based off of the long term rental standards because
Mhm.
whatever happens, I know I can always use this as a long term rental. If midterm rental doesn't
Mhm.
work out, or if I don't want to deal with short term rentals, I can automatically go back to long term renting and I'm still going to be profitable. So I always just base it off of those numbers and that criteria.
What does communication look like during the actual tenant stay? Meaning, like, are they connecting with you through Furnish Finder? Are they connecting with you through Airbnb? Or are they texting you? What does that look like? And what are some of the things that could go wrong in a midterm rental? Like, meaning, does stuff ever break?
Oh yes, yes. So typically, it depends on which platform they connected with me through. So, for example, Airbnb, they're usually going to just message me through Airbnb, but so I will reach out to them, and I do give them the phone number. So sometimes they'll just text. Majority of my guests simply just text me if they need anything. So I check on my guests after they check in, like within 24 hours, just to make sure they're okay, they don't need anything. But other than that, I leave them alone unless there's a major event happening. So let's just say a storm or the electricity went out or something is happening in the area. I'll check on them. But majority of the time, they're just texting me, and that's just it. Now, as far as repairs, yes, there's going to be things that come up just like any other rental, things that just happen out of the blue. Now, I haven't had any of my guests like tear anything up, but just normal things that happen, like maybe the air condition, something's wrong with the air condition, or, the outlet might have gone out or something minor. Those things just happen.
Got it. When you're arbitraging, how do you handle repairs on the property?
So that also depends on my agreements with the landlords. I have properties where there's a property manager in place. So all I have to do is contact him. He'll send out the handyman, and that it's all good. I don't have to do too much. Other properties that I may own, or I have an agreement with the landlord to manage the building because I have several units in the building. Then that's me. That's me contacting the vendors to get whatever it is. Normally I will go take a look and see what exactly is wrong, or I have the guests send me a video or pictures of what's going on if I can't get there. And then I just handle it myself on that end. But there are some companies, or you can try to find a property management company that could handle those things for you as far as the maintenance or repairs or anything like that.
Got it. What's the worst tenant you've ever had on a midterm rental?
The worst tenant. Okay, I gotta think about this one. Because typically, I mean, they're not really bad guests. You do have some, and this is maybe just depending on your personality. Okay,
Yeah.
so this is not going to be across the board, but there are some guests that are more needier than others, or you're like, you couldn't handle this on your own. So, for example, I had one guest call me and all frantic because they parked in a parking spot that was reserved for someone else, and I guess somebody left a note on their car, and so they're calling me about it. And I'm like, okay, like we'll just park in another spot. And things like this happens, it wasn't your fault, so just little stuff like that. I'm just kind of like, was that a need to call? But okay, so some people just may need a little bit more hand holding. I can't say I've had a nightmare guest. Now, has there been things that have happened where I've had to either let a guest leave early because it was out of my control or something like that? That has happened, but they weren't nightmare guests.
Got it. Perfect. Anything else that you think would be important as it relates to midterm rentals?
I think the most important thing is just to have a clear expectation of midterm rentals. I know everybody is kind of just jumping into midterm rentals. It's like the hot thing now. A lot of people who have short-term rentals are trying to change over or do both, but there's a little bit of a difference, and you do just have to recognize that you do have to do some more legwork with the midterm rentals. So, like I stated before, this is not something where you can just throw up a listing and you're just done and you don't have to do anything else. You're constantly going to be making sure your properties are filled and thinking of new ways to get them filled. So, like I said, those networking opportunities or collaborating with other hosts in your area, like you're always going to have to do something to make sure your name is out there and you can get your properties filled.
Got it. I love it. Now, Kelly, you have a course on midterm rentals. What does that course consist of? And if somebody wanted to get in contact with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Oh yeah, so the name of the course is Cash Flow Through Midterm Rentals, and my specialty is really giving you the foundations of how to set your business up and making sure you're successful doing that groundwork, footwork that you need to do. So that's the name of it. I do have a live workshop I'm doing on Saturday to teach people live about that. But if you want to reach me, you can reach me via my email address. So that is krimes@kmwrenterprises.com. Or you can find me on social media, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, under Miss Kelly Michelle. If you just search for it, you can find me. I have a ton of information out there.
I love it, Kelly. Well, Kelly, I want to say thank you for taking the time to be on the show. This episode was extremely helpful. For our viewers out there, we covered how to run a midterm rental or how to invest in midterm rental properties. We talked about how to underwrite them. We talked about how to finance them. We talked about the different types of tenants for midterm rentals. How long do they stay? We talked about numbers. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you feel that this episode would be helpful to somebody, make sure to hit that share button. Once again, Kelly, thank you so much. And to our viewers, until next time.